The E.T. Adventure is a classic Universal dark ride which helped Universal prove itself as a destination that could rival Disney. At the time of its opening, the E.T. Adventure was a real draw for the newly opened Orlando park, and in Hollywood it helped establish this working movie studio as a real genuine theme park. The dark ride takes guests on a flying bike ride with E.T. on a mission to save the terrifying inhabitants of his homeworld. All versions of the ride, past and present, had detailed theming to immerse their guests on their intergalactic adventure with E.T. Us on the Hollywood side of things mourn its loss, and folks over at Orlando are scared yearly that the nearly 35-year-old attraction will close its doors. It's a classic in the theme park world, and its smell is so iconic people make candles out of it. So today we'll be talking about the history of the E.T. Adventure. In order to talk about the E.T. Adventure, we'll have to take it back to the year 1980. Pac-Man just released and became the highest grossing arcade game of all time, and Ronald Reagan was named Time Magazine's Man of the Year. Also at the same time, Steven Spielberg was now a household name after hits like Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and was looking into a concept that came from his own relationship with an imaginary friend during his parents' divorce. At this time, Steven was filming Raiders of the Lost Ark in Tunisia, and during his free time during the shoot, he would start to refine his imaginary friend idea into a story about a young boy and his unlikely friendship with an alien who was abandoned on Earth. The idea was eating away at him, so he turned to Harrison Ford and writer Melissa Matheson. Melissa really enjoyed the idea, and by December of the same year, she drafted the script for the movie we all know and love. Shooting began the following year on a budget of $10.5 million, and the film was premiered at the closing for the 1982 Cannes Film Festival in May. It would then release nationwide a few months later in June of 1982. E.T. is one of the best family films of the 80s. It offers a weirdly realistic view into how much a divorce can really affect children, and the parallel of E.T. and Elliot both feeling abandoned and bonding together is incredibly heartwarming. You guys seen the movie, and if you haven't, I don't know what you're doing. Just go watch E.T. and then come back to this video. Long story short, deservingly, E.T. became a huge hit in the box office and was a cash cow in merchandise sales. A couple years later, Spielberg, inspired partially by his friend George Lucas's upcoming collaboration with Walt Disney Imagineering, met with his ex-college roommate Peter Alexander, who was also an ex-Disney Imagineer, who is now working as producer and director of the King Kong portion of the studio tour. Spielberg recently agreed to partner with Universal on the construction of an Orlando theme park. He was wanting to see what Universal Creative really had going for them, and of course he was impressed that the Kong attraction was something that pushed the limits of what people thought was possible in a theme park attraction. Once Kong was a huge success for Universal, it brought tons of new visitors to Universal Studios Hollywood, and this basically gave them the confidence to go about making the Orlando theme park. In 1989, pre-concepting was started on a family dark ride attraction themed around E.T. Spielberg would have his hand in a lot of Universal Orlando, and his input and influence was sprinkled through the entire park. Peter Alexander would work closely with Spielberg on the E.T. attraction, which he found difficult due to the fact that they wanted to cram the whole plot of a movie into a couple-minute-long dark ride. They knew one thing was for sure, and it was that they wanted guests to have that feeling of being chased by cops and government agents just for you to fly away at the last second. It would be Peter's idea to have you fly to E.T.'s homeworld, and this was partially inspired by a written sequel to the movie, which was a book titled E.T. The Book of the Green Planet, which describes E.T.'s homeworld as an ecological utopia where all these weird plant-based aliens kind of live in harmony. The book also is directly linked to creating the character of Botanicus and inspiring the horrifying friends of E.T. Peter Alexander grew up near the coast and was inspired by the aquatic life he saw in his hometown in California, and most of E.T.'s world is inspired by aquatic plants and coral reefs. Spielberg stressed to Alexander that he wanted the story to have a personal touch. He wanted guests to feel like they were really helping E.T. and are a part of the adventure. Peter and Steven would come up with the idea of writers helping E.T. get back to his home planet in order to stop it from dying with the powers of E.T.'s magic healing finger. Universal would bring in the Sally Corporation, who you may know from rides like Gobbler's Getaway and the Scooby-Doo Haunted Mansion, and they would come in to design hundreds of animatronics and plant scenery for the ride. This ride was incredibly ambitious and would be Universal's attempt of making a Pirates of the Caribbean or a Haunted Mansion level family dark ride. Peter, listening to Spielberg's words about making the ride personal and always wanting to push the limit of theme park technology, came up with the idea of E.T. addressing and thanking riders by name for the finale of the attraction. To make this all possible, Universal would team up with Brickett Engineering, a ride control and engineering company, to design a computer system and database that would allow E.T. to have text-to-speech capabilities of over 20,000 names. These names would be taken as riders entered the queue, and they would be given their interplanetary passport, which is essentially just a barcode that is linked to an RFID chip on the ride vehicle. This allows ET to attempt to say the names of riders as they pass. It's a famously hit or miss gimmick of the attraction, but it's still a cool concept nonetheless, and it works sometimes. John Williams even agreed to score original music for the ride, and the ride was fairly quickly conceptualized and built, and it opened with the opening of Universal Orlando on June 7th, 1990. The ride had many issues during its testing and development, but this was kind of the norm for Universal during the launch of its first dedicated theme park. The opening day was seen as a huge disaster, with multiple rides breaking down throughout most of it. ET was not safe from any of these issues, but eventually Universal would get their act together. AT&T would sponsor the ride due to the fact that ET says phone home so much, and regardless of its issues, the ET ride was seen as a huge success, and guests loved the idea of riding on a flying bike to an alien planet. I also think the large tandem bike ride vehicle idea is one of the coolest of all time. It just looks super cool and super creative and original. So now let's quickly break down what guests would experience on the ET adventure. Guests enter a soundstage, and then they would see a TV with a Q video. The original Q video was hosted by Steven Spielberg, and while guests were entering, you'd be talking about how you're on set for an ET sequel, and the interplanetary passports were just guest access passes at this point, and the idea was kind of silly considering the fact that Spielberg wanted this ride to feel personal, but essentially what he made it was just, hey, you're hanging out on the set of ET2, which is way less fun. For the 20th anniversary of the film, they would change this experience due to the fact that even Spielberg thought it was time to refresh the pre-show, and this pre-show would see Spielberg hanging out randomly in a forest with E.T. He enlists the help of the guests to help E.T. get back to his home planet to save it from dying. With our help and the help of E.T.'s magic finger, Steven explains that we'll be needing our interplanetary passport in order to travel through space, which makes me ask the question if there's some sort of like TSA or like police I should be worrying about. Like, is there a government like of space that is controlling? I don't know. Maybe that's right. After giving our names and getting our passports, we walk through one of the best queues of all time. The dense forest of the ET queue really makes you feel like you're walking outside in the forest, and there's enough details to keep you entertained as you wait for your turn. Botanicus is the alien wise man that kind of appears throughout the ride, and he appears as a hologram asking for ET's help using some cool fog effects and a green laser. We also see a glowing heart run through the trees, kind of showing us that, ET's actively running away from the police. There's a speak and spell, the kind of alien communication device that Elliot builds in the movie, spelling out help ET. There's also an adorable animatronic rabbit, which is also a reference to the movie. This rabbit appears, I think it's when like ET is almost dead, like when he's in the gutter. I don't know, but shout out to ET in the gutter. That shit is awesome. The animatronics and effects in this queue add so much atmosphere to the story of this ride, and I only wish Hollywood had something like this right now. We really don't have something on the level of this theming. I mean, maybe Mario Kart, but I don't think that's even close to being as cool as all the stuff in ET. At the end of the queue, you board your bike and the ride begins. It starts off in a dense forest where we see multiple government scientists working in a makeshift research base. They state they have reports of unauthorized people on this base, and ET says, uh-oh, trouble. At this point, we are now being chased. We hear them saying on walkie-talkies that we're getting away and that they need to cut us off, and we see lights of a car in a forest approaching us as we make a right turn into the woods, just barely losing them. Already, this ride is insanely well done, and there really is this sense of fear getting caught. It kind of just throws you right into it. Multiple military cars pull up as we quickly make our way through the forest, even dodging an animatronic owl at one point. We jump over a cop car and completely freak out the officer standing by it, and we make another right turn and over some bushes until we see we're completely cornered by the cops. This is when ET makes the bike fly over the mountain, and we see something ripped straight from Peter Pan's flight. This ride uses the same forced perspective tiny model of a city to give us that feeling of flying hundreds of feet in the air. We pass the city floating through the stars, passing a moon that recreates that iconic shadow shot from the film, and then we make a slight drop and the ride vehicle speeds up, and it seems like we enter some sort of warp speed tunnel, like we're going through hyperspace or something, and then there's this large explosion of LED lights. This is the transition that takes us straight to ET's planet, and before we can describe what happens next, I just think it's a good time to drop some lore on the green planet itself and all the silly little alien people that reside on it. The green planet looks like something straight out of the Star Wars prequel series, and it looks very colorful and full of life. planet is run by a head wise man named Botanicus, who we talked about earlier, and we get the idea that all the inhabitants on this planet are kind of connected to it. It's almost like they're all like kind of this like ecological hive mind. So, you know, if the planet is dying, so are the people on the planet itself. Each one of these animatronic aliens is incredibly scary, and a lot of people find this part of the ride kind of weird and uncanny, but let's break down each one of E.T.'s very scary friends. Tikli is a pumpkin root looking little goblin man. Orbidon is that big mushroom guy and is probably the least scary of them all. I like him, he's cool. But Magdoll is this weird palm tree looking creature with a terrifying doll face, and I'm sure she has terrified children for decades. After crash landing on the green planet, we are greeted by Botanicus as he stands in front of the alien spaceship from the film, and he tells us we gotta go save the rest of E.T.'s friends. In the next room, we see E.T.'s powers with the power of LED light technology save all of his friends one by one, and yes, unfortunately, even Magdoll. They kind of solve the problem pretty quickly, and the rest of the ride is just kind of a fun, goofy, silly time on E.T.'s home planet. It's very colorful, very detailed. We see a lot of kinetic elements like water flowing around us, plants moving, and alien life, and of course little baby ETs just kind of hanging out. They're everywhere. There's even one swinging on a vine. It's pretty cool. Shout out to baby E.T. on a vine. After our acid trip, we move into a final room where, using our RFID interplanetary passport, E.T. attempts to thank us and say our names. This is when we fly back home, seeing the shape of E.T. and Elliot's fingers touching in the stars, just before we make our way back to the forest we started in. This ride's incredible, and the hanging Peter Pan style ride system makes for an immersive and exciting experience, not to mention the fact the ride is making its own original story and taking guests to locations never before seen in the film. After the success of the Orlando attraction, Universal was quick to want to bring this to its West Coast park. E.T. would partner again with Sally and Burkett to build a new Hollywood version, and a new soundstage will be built on the lower lot to house the attraction, and it would be almost a carbon copy from the original Florida version. The Hollywood version would open June 7th, 1990, with a grand opening ceremony that had a giant costume E.T. emerge from a space shuttle. The ride would become a classic for Universal Studios Hollywood until it was demolished in 2003 to make way for the Revenge of the Mummy, which we covered in last week's video. This was a huge loss for the park and for fans of dark rides everywhere. Universal Hollywood gained a thrill ride but lost one of the best themed attractions at the park. The pieces of the E.T. ride that were still left were used in the Wolfman Forest area of the House of Horrors. Also, one of the cop animatronics was used for the Phantom of the Opera in that same attraction. And rumor has it Botanicus is still in storage somewhere at Universal. Hashtag free Botanicus. I still wish and hope in the future that we can get more theming added to Universal. I know the next big thing is this Fast and the Furious coaster, but after I hope we get something really nice and like elaborate, like another dark ride or something. The final and last version of the E.T. adventure would be built at Universal Studios Japan in 2001, and the ride would also be a carbon copy of the Hollywood and Orlando version. This would close a little bit later than Hollywood in 2009, where it was replaced by a Space Mountain-esque spinning coaster called Space Fantasy, which is now mostly rethemed to various anime IPs. The last and freestanding E.T. is at Universal Orlando, and it has still been getting touch-ups and improvements on its quality of life, while other attractions such as Confrontation and Jaws just get replaced for newer and more hit properties. E.T. is still going strong. It is rumored that Steven Spielberg says that he would cut ties with Universal altogether if they got rid of the ride, but I don't know, that just sounds like a load of barnacles to me. I think the real reason it is kept around is because it's a true classic and it's loved by guests decades after its opening. Universal Orlando has the land to keep this ride and still expand and build new ones around it. It's situated in the back of the park in a relatively untouched location, and I can't see them really getting rid of it anytime soon. At least I hope not. In the theme park world, nothing is sacred, so honestly I wouldn't be surprised if the next thing we found out is that it was getting replaced by like a Wicked themed sing-along motion simulator or something.
That's my life.
But I guess we can only hope and just keep enjoying the fact that the E.T. adventure still lives on. Thank you guys so much for watching. I know my voice is like super bad right now, so thank you for listening. I'm coming off of a sickness and illness. I'm bedridden. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I am working on more videos. Thank you. Bye.